Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back to Potomac Watch. Kim Strassel with Kate Batchelder-Odell and Alicia Finley. We're talking about Kamala Harris's long-lost Medicare for All plan, which, again, Kate said it felt like a political lifetime ago. But actually, this was a plan developed by a woman in her mid-50s who was sitting in the Senate and had put a lot of details into it. So I find it mind-boggling, even the notion that she could now claim that she's not for that anymore. I think it sends its own weird signal that you can have someone that's been in politics this long and claims to be where the point she is on the verge of the presidency and still hasn't made up her mind on what she thinks about healthcare. But Alicia, a little bit more, let's remember what happened back in 2019 and just drill into this question of where Medicare for All stands right now as a political issue or liability. Back then, remember, there was a huge divide, as Kate alluded to, between Joe Biden. He was one of the only ones on the stage who said, I'm not going to go down this road. You had a number of progressives, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, all up on the stage saying, this is the way we have to go. This is the future of the party. In the end, as Kate noted, Democratic primary voters didn't like that idea. And of course, what sunk it were a couple of things. The enormous cost, which even Joe Biden pointed out, Americans would end up paying for this one way or another, but also because they'd probably end up getting something that they didn't like as much either. People like their private health insurance. They might complain about the paperwork, etc., but they understand they get a certain quality of care that is not guaranteed when you look at other countries that have subsidized government-run health care. But I think the issue here, Alicia, is that Kamala Harris can now stand here and whisper and say, well, I'm not really for that. But the reality is that isn't this where the entire direction of her party is at the moment? And couldn't we and shouldn't we expect that if she's the nominee, this is where we go? I mean, look at the degree to which progressives right now are trying to mold and push her campaign in a certain direction.
Well, I think going back to what we were discussing in the fracking ban context, there are a lot of ways to essentially accomplish the transition to a single-payer system, just like there are ways to essentially effectively ban fracking. And you're already kind of seeing that under the Biden administration through the increased subsidies for the ACA Affordable Care Act plans, which have actually caused a lot of the employers to drop their employees, because why would you pay for workers' health care when the employee can get much more generous subsidized health care from the government? And so as a result, you're actually seeing enrollment in these ACA plans. These are, quote unquote, actually the Obamacare plans, balloon, which is extremely costly for the government. But what's notable about these ACA plans is they are heavily regulated by the government. They have to provide all kinds of essential benefits and such. And they are essentially, to Kate's point, in a way, they are like public utilities and insurers that offer them. But I think what other ways you may start to see this kind of transition to a Medicare for all is the way the Biden administration has actually proposed in its budget to cap drug prices across the entire economy, not just for Medicare. And Kamala Harris, she has actually supported doing so. So essentially government price setting for private services. And what's interesting is her VP pick, Tim Walz, has tried to do the same in Minnesota. In 2023, they passed a law that would give the government power to essentially dictate prices for drugs. And they also tried to do the same for hospitals, including for those who have private coverage. Now, the Mayo Clinic basically revolted and said, well, we're going to scotch a $4 billion in investment in this state if you start basically imposing price controls on what private insurers pay hospitals. And so they backtracked on that. But that's clearly the goal, is to impose more government control over these private insurers and private providers.
And clearly, this just underlines why this needs to be a major topic of debate in this election. And so, Kate, I'm going to leave the final question to you. Where the heck are Republicans making this an issue? I mean, you said you felt 2019 felt like a lifetime ago. The last time I remember a Republican actually talking coherently about healthcare was when they were voting for and failed to repeal Obamacare. Ever since then, they seem to be missing. Is this not a big, fat political liability that they ought to be trying trying to hit out of the park?
Republicans have pretty much joined the Witness Protection Program after failing to repeal the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, in 2017, and they don't want to talk about it anymore. Even Republicans have sort of accepted this Democratic notion that Obamacare is really popular. Now, the distinction I try to make is what people think of as Obamacare, by which they associate with meaning having some coverage for people who have a hard time getting covered in other places. That concept is broadly popular, but the product itself, the people who hold it, don't like it. And we know that because Democrats keep expanding, like Alicia said, expanding these subsidies to get people to even buy it. So basically, that's a concession that it's not a very valuable product. It tends to feature very narrow doctor networks. And if you have an insurance card, you get cancer or something terrible and you can't see the preferred oncologist or somebody that you want to see, your insurance card is not very valuable. But these arguments are completely lost in the larger Republican conversation at this point. So I do think, first of all, Trump should be going hard against Medicare for all and pointing that out as just a real risk of electing Kamala. I think that's a place where the Republicans have the clear political high ground. The public does not want a Medicare for all style system, even if whatever discontents that they have about the current system. And then second, yes, you do have to rebuild this Republican intellectual muscle memory on how are we going to create more competition? How are we going to improve people's options? How are we going to get people into better coverage than things like Medicaid? You have a lot of Republicans now who are even on board with just expanding Medicaid to new populations. Well, that covers up the problem that Medicaid is not good insurance. It doesn't tend to get you into good hospitals. So these are the kinds of conversations that Republicans need to get back into having and make a sustained case that the U.S. healthcare system is really the last free system of the world. We drive so much healthcare innovation. We do not want to give that up. And that is really who Kamala is, even if she is now pretending otherwise or being amorphous about what her views are. So hopefully we start to see some focus on that issue from the Trump campaign, but maybe don't get too optimistic about that at this juncture.
Well, hear to all that you said about what they should be talking about. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Alicia. We thank all of our listeners for being here with us. We are here every weekday. We'll be back tomorrow. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. And if you like the show, please hit that subscribe button.